Imagine a Tuesday morning where breakfast is grown in a greenhouse on the moon, shipped down before sunrise, still cold from the trip. Imagine your commute isn't a highway, it's a scheduled transport window, and today it happens to be taking you to Mars because your job needs you there for the week, the same way a work trip today might take you to another city. Imagine a kid doing homework about home and having to specify which one: the apartment on Earth, the research outpost near the lunar South Pole, or the terraformed valley on Mars, where their grandparents actually live now. Imagine a wedding where half the guests are physically in the room and half are attending from three different worlds. The ceremony timed carefully so the toasts still land in the right order despite the delay. Imagine a chef who trained on Earth taking a job at a restaurant on Mars, bringing recipes nobody up there has tasted yet. Imagine a nurse whose rounds include a shift on a lunar base twice a month because medical staff are still valuable enough to be worth the trip, the same way a specialist doctor today might fly out to a rural hospital. And imagine, too, that most people never leave Earth at all. And that's completely fine because it was never really about everyone going somewhere. It's about it being possible, ordinary, unremarkable, the same way most people alive today have never been to Antarctica, but nobody finds it strange that some people live and work there permanently. None of this is about a handful of astronauts anymore. It's just what an ordinary week looks like for ordinary people once humanity stopped being a single planet species and started being a solar system wide one. This is what scientists actually predict a Type 2 civilization would look like. The second rung on the same real energy scale we talked about last time. The one that measures how advanced a civilization is by nothing except how much energy it controls. A Type 1 civilization uses everything a home planet can offer. A Type 2 civilization goes further. It captures the entire output of its own stars, saying every bit of light and heat the sun produces, not just the sliver that happens to hit Earth. And here's the thing worth sitting with before we even get to the science. None of this works with just one planet's worth of people. A Type 2 civilization isn't really about bigger power plants, it's about there being enough of humanity, spread out over enough real estate, the moon, Mars, wherever else, that capturing an entire star's output actually makes sense to build in the first place. The daily life and the physics are the same story, not two separate ones. So picture it a little further. A teacher on Earth video calls a classroom on Mars so easily that the 16-minute light delay at that distance is just a known quirk of the schedule, the way a bad Wi-Fi connection is today. A retired couple splits their year between a house on Earth and a smaller one near a lunar research base, the way people today split time between two cities. A shipping company tracks cargo the same way, whether the package is going across a country or across the solar system. The paperwork's more complicated, but nobody treats it as a miracle anymore. A farmer on Earth grows a crop specifically bred for lunar greenhouses, shipping seed stock up rather than food down. A musician records an album with collaborators on two different worlds, trading files back and forth across the delay the way bands today work across time zones. A kids' soccer league on Mars plays under a lower gravity rule set, and every few years there's an argument about whether Earth teams should get a handicap when they visit. The same tired argument sports fans always have about home field advantage. This is the part that's easy to skip past. None of this requires everyone to be an astronaut, or a genius, or a pioneer. It requires the ordinary infrastructure of moving people and things around, reliable enough, common enough, boring enough, that it fades into the background of daily life the same way air travel did a century after the Wright brothers. Here's where the real physics comes back in. Capturing an entire star's energy output is usually described using an idea called a Dyson sphere, a massive structure built around a star, proposed by physicist Freeman Dyson in 1960, designed to collect nearly all the light a star gives off instead of letting almost all of it scatter uselessly into space. But the actual science here has a twist worth being honest about because the version most people picture, one giant solid shell wrapped around a star, has a real physics problem. Researchers who've studied this seriously, including Oxford's Anders Sandberg, point out that a solid sphere isn't structurally stable. Nothing holds a shell like that in place around a star. Even tiny imbalances would cause it to drift and eventually collide with the very star it's supposed to surround. The version that actually holds up mathematically is stranger and, honestly, more interesting. Not one solid shell, but a Dyson swarm. Thousands, maybe millions, of separate, smaller collectors, all independently orbiting the star at different distances and angles, each one grabbing a slice of its light. No single structure, just an enormous coordinated cloud of collectors all orbiting together like a solar system's worth of satellites that happen to add up to something planet scale. which means in the same imagined week, someone's actual job might be monitoring a tiny slice of that swarm, nudging a handful of collectors back into proper orbit the way a power grid technician today checks a section of transmission lines. Not glamorous, not science fiction, just Tuesday for somebody. Somewhere else, an engineer spends her career on nothing but collision avoidance, making sure that out of millions of independently orbiting panels, none of them ever drift into each other's path. A problem that barely existed as a career field a few centuries earlier and is now considered one of the most important jobs in the solar system. So, why would anyone build something this enormous in the first place? Not just because more energy is nice to have. At this scale, the honest answer is that it's what real, larger scale civilization requires. Genuinely reshaping a planet's climate to make Mars livable without a suit. Running the kind of computation and infrastructure a multi world society actually needs. Keeping travel between worlds cheap and common enough that a family can actually be spread across 3 of them without it being a hardship. Terraforming alone is a genuinely staggering energy problem. Warming an entire planet's atmosphere, generating a magnetic field strong enough to hold that atmosphere in place. Running that process not for a decade but for centuries, all while everything else a solar system civilization needs keeps running at the same time. None of that comes from a handful of solar panels on a rooftop. It comes from the kind of energy budget only a captured star can realistically provide. A star's worth of energy isn't a luxury at that point. It's closer to what a city's power grid is now. Not exciting on its own, just the thing that makes the rest of ordinary life possible. Nobody marvels at their power outlet every morning. A Type 2 civilization would, eventually, feel the exact same way about a star. Something else would happen along the way, quietly the same way it always does when people settle somewhere long enough. The cultures would start to drift apart. A kid born on Mars, in lower gravity under a sky that's never once been blue, would grow up with a slightly different sense of what normal even means than a kid born on Earth. Slang would diverge. Holidays would shift to match different calendars, different day lengths, different reasons to celebrate. A few generations in, someone from the lunar colonies might visit Earth for the first time and find themselves the one who feels like the tourist, standing in a gravity that suddenly feels unfairly heavy, blinking at a sky that's the wrong color of blue for what they grew up calling normal. None of that requires the science to be finished. It just requires enough ordinary people living enough ordinary years in enough different places for it to stop being a settlement and start being simply where they're from. Here's the part worth being honest about, the same way we were honest about Type 1. This is enormously far away. Not because the physics is impossible. A Dyson swarm doesn't require any laws of nature we don't already understand, the same way Type 1 didn't. Though it's a matter of engineering and scale and time, just an almost unimaginably larger amount of all 3. Some estimates put a genuine Type 2 civilization thousands of years in humanity's future, if it happens at all. Getting there requires not just better engines and reliable interplanetary transport, but generations of people simply living their lives across multiple worlds, long enough for it to stop feeling remarkable. To put the scale in perspective, everything humanity has ever built, every road, every city, every satellite, uses only a tiny fraction of the energy that reaches Earth from the Sun in a single day, and Earth only intercepts a sliver of what the Sun actually produces every second, in every direction, most of it disappearing uselessly into empty space. A Dyson swarm doesn't ask for more power than exists. It asks humanity to eventually be big enough, spread out enough, and patient enough to actually go collect the power that's already there, that's been pouring past us this entire time. And that, maybe, is the real heart of it. Nobody wakes up a Type 2 civilization overnight. It happens the way most enormous things actually happen. Not with a single leap, but with an ordinary Tuesday, repeated for centuries, until enough ordinary Tuesdays add up to something that would look impossible from where we're standing right now. A greenhouse on the moon, a work trip to Mars, a kid with 2 grandparents on 2 different worlds, and homework that just has to specify which one. None of it starts with a star. It starts with breakfast.